Brother Sam here at Destiny by Design, Lesson 17, Focus Part 2. Proverbs 4:25 says, "Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you." We're going to continue to discuss focus and why it is essential to the completion of your destiny. And specifically, I want to talk with you about how I personally get and stay focused. Because everything requires focus. You can't learn without focus. You can't really communicate well without focus, and you really can't achieve anything important without focus. So that having been said, here's some things I do to get and stay focused. One is meditation, and I'm not talking about anything hokey or spooky. I'm talking about what the Word says. For example, in Psalm chapter 1. Psalm 1, verses 1 to 3 reads, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. For his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He will be like the tree planted by streams of water, whose leaf does not wither, and bears his fruit in his season, and everything he does prospers." You want to succeed in what God has given you to do, you're going to need to not walk in the counsel of the ungodly. You're going to need to not stand in the way of sinners or sit in the seat of the scornful. But you're going to have to delight in the law of the Lord, delight in the ways of God, and meditate on his law day and night. Keep God in mind. So one of the ways I stay focused is I meditate on the law of the Lord. I meditate on the Word of God. I think about it. It doesn't really mean anything deep or mystical and spooky. It just means to give serious thought to. Mentally ruminate it. And at least spend, especially like at the beginning of your day, start your day with some reflection on your values, on where God has brought you from, where God is pointing you to. And then evaluate and think of your goals in that context. And so keep your mind on the big picture and not on details that may not have much impact. You've got to learn to keep the big picture in mind. A lot of us get swamped with details. Another thing I do in order to be able to focus is I slow down. And I tell this to prophets all the time: slow down, stop being in such a hurry. And this doesn't just apply to prophecy. This applies to so many things in life. We're in such a hurry, we're trying to do this, we're trying to do that, and we're in such a hurry to do it that very often we don't do it effectively, we do it poorly, or we end up not doing it at all. Years ago, when I worked in the security industry, I had to take a handcuffing course. It was required. You had to learn how to handcuff people. And I'll never forget what the instructor said about being able to handcuff someone quickly. Because they taught you how to handcuff them and take them down on the ground. And they made us practice it very slowly. And this is what he said: fast is slow. And it didn't originate with him. They teach this in martial arts. They teach this in boxing. Fast is slow. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. And so especially when you're acquiring a skill, or when you're learning to develop your giftings and learning to walk in your calling, slow down. Because fast is slow. You're trying to do things fast, you're going to make mistakes, and that's going to slow you down. Mistakes may cost you. Slow down until you get it smooth. Smooth becomes fast. Now, when we learn not to hurry, most of the people in the class could handcuff somebody in about 3 or 4 seconds. And they actually did a little contest to see who could do it the fastest. I came in second at about 2.5 seconds. And that's from grabbing the person's arm, cuffing the first wrist, doing the takedown, and having them completely handcuffed and subdued. Fast is slow. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. They teach the same thing in Krav Maga, which is Israeli combat techniques. They don't like to call it a martial art because it's not pretty. They teach you to do everything in slow motion. You practice the moves in slow motion so that your body gets what they call muscle memory. Your muscles remember the movement, and because you did it slow so many times, now you can do it fast, and you can do it really fast, and you never really forget it. And very similarly, whether it's exercising your gifts or almost everything, you're going to need to do that's going to require skill, or that's going to require finesse, or that's going to be that's going to require you to do it well. You're going to need to slow down at some point. You're also more observant when you slow down. You'll notice a lot more things driving at 20 miles an hour than you do at 90. There are things at 90 miles an hour that are just a blur, that at 20 miles an hour you're going to see them. And there's things that you'll miss at 20 miles an hour that at 5 miles an hour you will spot it. Another thing I learned in the security industry. Some properties you had to do a patrol on a vehicle, and they told you don't drive fast. Don't do it any more than 5 miles an hour. Because if you drive any faster than that, you're going to miss something. Learn to slow down. Another thing I do is what I call decluttering the mind. When somebody asks me about something I don't really want to go into detail about because I either find it cumbersome or a waste of time, or I don't think it's important, I often say, why clutter your mind with the inconsequential? Now, I'll admit, my flippant tendencies may not help you to unleash your vision, but there's a truth here that will. It's hard to focus on the things that matter most when you've got too much nonsense and unimportant thought going on in your head. You got to learn to prioritize tasks, prioritize people, places, and so on. Because some things are not that important. Some things do not require your full attention, and some things don't require any of your attention at all. Some of us waste a lot of energy on things that are really none of our business. I see people, especially on social media, they're so concerned about what they think, or they're haters. This person said this, and this person said that, this person talked about. Who cares? Who cares? Worry about reputation management later, if at all. And in the kingdom, you don't really need to worry about it. God has his ways of defending your reputation if your reputation needs to be defended. Now, let's face it, we all have stuff to deal with, one way or another. We all have things in our life that take up more time than we'd like it to. And in my own case, over the years, I've had the occasional high-maintenance, low-value client, badly behaved in-laws, parents and siblings who hated me all my life, and who aren't above trying to sabotage my career, and they've done it before. And more than a few, if you want to call them haters, who always seem to be determined to cause some kind of trouble. Then there's various family responsibilities, problems arising from injuries that I've sustained over the years, and so on and so forth. So how do I deal with all of these things? Run a business. At the time, a couple of years, I was even running a couple of web comics. I was writing books, writing articles. In about a 4-year period, I produced six web comics, wrote two web comics, 6 graphic novels, 2 books, and I think over 200 articles that I wrote, while juggling everything else. Now, how do I do that? I tend to compartmentalize things. Things that are not that important get set aside. I prioritize the things that matter most and work on that first. And now, people who believe in psychology, they try to define compartmentalization as a defense mechanism or coping strategy, but that just makes it sound like a problem rather than a potential solution. Now, we shouldn't compartmentalize everything, but as far as tasks and managing your activity, you need to. I don't believe in time management. I do believe in activity management. And more importantly, I believe in managing your intentions. Because if you can manage your intentions, you manage your decisions. If you manage your decisions, you'll manage your activity. If you can manage your activity, your time will manage itself. Now, usually when we think of compartmentalization, we usually think of it as a way our minds deal with conflicting internal ideas. I think of it more like a filing system for ideas and priorities which compete for attention if they're at the forefront of my mind at the same time. And so this is what I do with ideas and things that I need to keep in mind or things that I need to deal with. I isolate each issue from, you take an issue, you isolate it from all the other challenges that you're dealing with, especially if it's not related to those other challenges. Isolate that particular issue. Apply your full attention on each item, but only one at a time and for a short period of time. My first novel, I wrote that mostly in 10 to 15 minute bursts of writing. Most of the time I would write for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. And I wrote that novel in 5 months. And that's including all the editing and a major rewrite of almost half the book. So don't underestimate the power of working on something for completely focused on it for 10 to 15 minutes at a time. Third thing is to take action and move forward in small but measurable steps. Remember, an intention without a decision is just a wish, and you haven't decided anything until you take action. Now, so you move forward in small and measurable steps, and once you make progress, close that compartment and move on to the next one. Fourth thing is learn to say no to things that don't deserve your full and lasting attention. You gotta also learn how to say no to people. There are going to be people who demand your attention. There are going to be people who try to demand your time and they don't deserve it. Learn to weed out time wasters because they're going to rob your focus. Another thing I do, so that is the idea behind decluttering the mind. Now let's talk about what I call vision maintenance. Take a little time throughout the day, or at least a few times a week, to think about and revise your vision, revise your intentions. This will help you to make better decisions about what you need to do to achieve a particular goal, and it'll help you to gain clarity about your goals. And over time, and this is extremely important to do, simply because over time, your vision may very well change. Change is going to happen. Many people start out, I'll give you an example, that novel that I wrote, it didn't start off as a novel. It wasn't intended as such. There was a character that I wanted to put a character in the overall story of this series of novels, based on a friend of mine from a game I used to play on the internet. So all I had was a name to work with, and so I needed to create a backstory so this character would make sense and figure out how she'd fit into the overall story arc. And so I figured I'd write kind of an origin story. It'd be about 5 pages long, maybe 6 at the most, and that would be it. Before I knew it was like 10 or 12 pages, and it was like 5,000 words, and then got to 8,000 words. I was like, okay, I'll try to wrap it up now. Before I knew it was like 15,000 words, and at that point I knew it was going to turn into a novel, and that character became way more important than originally intended. It actually changed the course of the whole story. Plans can change. Visions change. Projects change. And you got to be prepared for it. That's why you need to do vision maintenance. And you're certainly going to change. In 10 years, you may not be exactly the same person you are now. You may have well grown. I would hope you grow in 10 years. I hope you become better. I hope you mature. I hope you become more refined in the call of God on your life. Another thing I do to keep my focus is I exercise. Seriously. Exercise reduces stress. It contributes to your overall health. And it can often clear your thinking. And it also releases good hormones that make you feel good. So that will also help you if you're feeling down or just having a rough day or whatever, and it helps you to burn off stress. And if you want to take it to another level, think about your intentions and decisions while you're exercising. You'd be surprised how clear some things become while your heart is pounding. I find that a great time when I'm working out in the gym. That's when I think about things that are really important, things that are bugging me that I can't solve. Why? Because my heart is pounding and blood is flowing. I got maximum blood flow everywhere. And it is interesting the effect that has on your thinking. Give it a try sometime. Another thing to maintain your focus, and one thing I do to maintain my focus, is to master the essential technologies. There's one thing that will destroy your focus is if there's technology you need to use to accomplish something and you don't know how to use it. And now you're spending all this time confused and you're trying to get this thing done. Imagine trying to put together some kind of, goodness, I'll give you an example from my own past. We were creating a publication for a pastoral banquet for a church. And I had to learn how to use Photoshop and get this thing done. It was such a nightmare learning how to do it, and while I was doing it, I don't think I slept for a few days. It was not pleasant, and mistakes were made, and people got mad at me, and it's like, I'm doing this without anybody's help, folks. You let me do this whole project by myself. But anyway, you want to master the essential technologies. Technology also has to be a tool, and when I say master the essential technologies, not just in terms of being able to use it competently, but also that technology doesn't master you. Technology has to be a tool and not a distraction. You got to treat it as a tool and not a toy. A lot of us in the digital age have started using social media to grow our businesses or to grow our ministries, and then we end up getting sucked in by Angry Birds or Farmville or the latest game app or whatever is popular at the moment, or we get drawn into pointless debates with people who are never going to change their minds no matter how well constructed our arguments are. A lot of times, a lot of us, and I've had it happen, you get sucked into an online argument with somebody on Facebook or some other social media. I've had it happen a few times. I try to avoid it because most of the time these people, they're not going to change their mind. They're committed to their ideology, and there's nothing you can say that's going to change their mind anyway. So stop wasting your time. So don't get involved in something like that unless the Holy Spirit's actually leading you. Mastering technology isn't just about learning how to use it, but learning their best use for your particular mission. And then learning to turn it all off when your full focus is needed elsewhere. Another thing you need to do, and something I do routinely, is I declutter my workspace. You've got enough to do without having to manage a mess. So, remove anything from your workspace that could be a distraction. For a few years, my desk was just a narrow hallway table, because that's what I used. Now, I did have like a 200 or 300 pound desk in the other room. It was a monstrosity. But when I needed to focus, I'd go to the otherwise unfurnished spare room, and I'd go there to just that bare table and get my work done. Because there was no clutter, there was nothing to distract me. And along those veins, the next thing I do is to create a focused workspace. This isn't just about eliminating distractions, but you want to make your workspace fit its function. And it needs to serve the best interest of your vision. Your ideal workspace should be put together to serve the 4 P's of business and relationships. The first one is perform. Does this part of your workspace help you to actually do what matters most? If it doesn't, it's not a tool, it's a toy. Get rid of it. Or play with it when you actually have time to do so. Or play with it after you've made your first million or two. Anyhow, the next P is process. Is this thing conducive to your process? Is it conducive to the current process of whatever it is you're working on? Whether it's a project for business, whether it's something in ministry. Is this conducive to getting it done? Is it conducive to the process, or does it interfere with it? If it doesn't make your process better, get rid of it. You don't need it. The third P is presence. Does it help you to be present here and now for your clients, partners, suppliers, people you're in ministry with, whatever it might be that you're working on? Does it help you to be present? Especially when you're looking to do business at an elite level, or you're looking to engage in a regional or multi-regional vision that God has given you. One thing you have to always be is present. If something in your workspace doesn't help you to give your full attention to things that actually matter and that matter most, it's either unnecessary or possibly harmful to the manifestation of your vision. And the final P is productivity. Does it help you to get more done without sacrificing quality? Does it save you time and effort? Does it enhance what you do in a measurable way? Not some vague way, well, yeah, I think it makes it better. No, can you measure this? An old saying in business, if it gets measured, it gets done. You think this doesn't apply to spiritual things? My goodness. A whole big section of Ezekiel where he's measuring. Actually, quite a few passages in the Bible where there's a whole lot of measuring going on. Now, there are some areas that, now we're going to talk about areas you need to focus on. And some of this will be for business, and you can adapt this to just about anything. In business, one of the things you're going to have to really focus on is customers. Because without them, you don't have anything. You can have the greatest product, the greatest service, the greatest everything, but if you don't have any customers, you got nothing. Always remember, in most cases, your customers, or let's say people that you want to reach with your ministry, they've got comparable options. They can buy from somebody else. When it comes to business and when it comes to ministry, they don't gotta listen to you. Not in today's digital age. They can go to somebody else's YouTube channel. They can go to somebody else's broadcast. They can go to somebody else's church, so on and so forth. They've got other options. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to tailor the Word of God to please people. But I am saying that you do need to make sure that you have the need of His people on your mind. Remember, Jesus didn't tell Peter when He said, do you love me? And he says, yes, Master, you know I love you. He didn't say, well, build your ministry. He said, feed my sheep. What kind of experience are you creating? What do people experience when they encounter the work of God that is expressed through you? Is the experience you're giving them the one God intended? Another thing you need to focus on is solutions. Whether in business or ministry, you are solving a problem or solving a set of problems. Especially for business, every successful business solves a problem or even many problems. What is the main problem that your particular vision can solve for others? Developing good solution focus will help not just your business, but it helps your personal life. It'll help your ministry. Steve DeShazer and Inso Kim Berg at the Brief Family Therapy Center in Milwaukee developed the solution focus approach based on the ideas of Milton Erickson and Gregory Bateson of the Mental Research Institute. And it began as a therapy model, but it's now used in coaching and organizational change management to great effect. It works basically on 4 principles. To focus on solutions, not problems. The most obvious part is that you'll get what you focus on. Understanding problems doesn't always help in finding solutions to them. Now, we do need to address problems. We need to identify them. We need to understand them to some extent. But I'm sure you know plenty of people. They can tell you what the problem is with something or anything. They can identify problems, and they're so good at identifying problems, and they can talk about it all day. They'll rant about it on social media, but they have not one solution for anything. See what I mean? It is possible to be really good at diagnosing problems and not having any solutions. So you need to focus on solutions. Identify problems. Don't ignore them. But commit more energy to solutions than you do to analyzing problems. Another principle that it's based on is people tend to have what they need to change. In many cases, people groups, and organizations may already have what they need to effect positive change. However, most of them haven't identified what works best. In almost any situation, some things are already working, and so if you find the things that are working already, and do more of what's working. So a lot of times people do know what they need to change, and it just doesn't apply to business, it applies in ministry. A lot of people know what they need to be doing differently. I know people say, well, I need to fast more. Well, do it. Another person said, well, my prayer life's been kind of skimpy, I'm not really praying. Well, what are you waiting for? So people usually, very often, have what they need to start changing, or they know what they need to do. So always understand that. Another principle you got to understand is that change occurs usually in small steps. Even small changes can have huge consequences. The difference between a hole-in-one in golf and the ball landing in the sand trap is often less than 1 millimeter in your golf swing. Solutions are often adjustments rather than upheavals. So not everything requires a drastic solution. And the final principle is to stay at the surface. Sometimes we get too deep in a problem or situation, and our focus becomes obsessed with the details of the situation, the details of the problem, rather than the solution. You don't always need to fully and intimately understand a problem to solve it. For example, if you think I'm wrong about this, I'll give you an example. You got a little kid, he's hungry. Now, you don't need to understand that certain cells in his body are releasing hormones that actually cause him to feel hungry, and that's why he's complaining, saying, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. You don't need to understand that. You know he's hungry. So, just knowing he's hungry, you can feed him and solve the problem without actually having a full understanding of why he's hungry. When did he last eat? What did he eat, etc., etc. You can, and very often we do this with a lot of things. I know I'm being overly simple here, but I'm doing that on purpose. A lot of times we overcomplicate things. Another focus, well, for business at least, there has to be for business. If your vision is a business, you're going to have a bit of a focus on money. That's just how it is. Because at the end of the day, business is about making a profit. And sure, we want to do the right thing, and we want to be ethical, and we want to be moral, and we want to, especially those of us who we are Christians, so we want to do what is right. But without profit, there's no business. So you do have to have some focus on that bottom line. You lose sight of that, and you're going to lose valuable business relationships. Because guess what? Not everybody out there is going to be as well. I'll put it this way: in business, you're probably not going to get too far if you don't have any kind of focus on money. Not saying you got to love money, but you got to be aware of it. Money is a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool. And really, money is just an idea, but that's another subject. So you need to have some attention on your cash flow if you're in business, and even in your ministry. I'm not saying you got to be focused on money for ministry, but you do have to have some awareness of your economic situation. A lot of ministries suffer because they manage their finances very poorly. Some of them even have significant revenue, but they they got no life insurance on the preacher. The preacher should have life insurance, should have multiple life insurance policies of different types to cover his family, but the church also should have life insurance on the preacher. Do you know that businesses often have what they call key person insurance? They take out life insurance policies on key people in their organization because they know, for example, if Scott is their #1 salesman and 30% of the sales revenue in the company comes through Scott, they know if Scott just dies in an automobile accident next week, the business is going to be hurting financially, and that's where that insurance comes in. Gives them a little bit of a boost while they're working on finding a replacement. Now that's an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but you do have to have some focus on the financial side of things, and we'll talk about that more later in the course. But you need, especially if you're in more so if you're in business than in ministry. In ministry, you do have to be having awareness of the assets at hand, whether it's finances, whether it's people, and you have to manage things properly. A few years ago, I had a chance to speak with the CEO of Merchant Advanced Capital, and his company, what they specialize is in lending money to businesses that temporarily need an influx of capital to accomplish a particular goal, or to manage rapid growth. And this is what he had to say on that subject. He said, "Since I'm a provider of capital to Canadian small businesses, I've seen many," and he was talking about errors in managing cash flow. "The first is budgets and financial forecasts with assumptions that are overly optimistic. We all think our ideas are gold, but it's important to budget for the fact that others might disagree. It might take time to prove to the market that what you do is important. It will take time for people to recognize your brand. In general, things always take longer and cost more than you initially think they will. So it is important to budget on that contingency." The second error that I have seen time and time again, and is perhaps more important than the first, is spending too much in the early days. Anyone getting into entrepreneurship needs to read the book The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. That's R-I-E-S. It is so important to spend as little as possible to prove out your business model. The error to overspend in the early days stems from the same root as the first error that I outlined, which is that people think their ideas are gold. When someone thinks their idea is gold, they think they need the full team in place and the major investment required to really build their idea into the golden statue that they believe it to be in their minds. People do this in ministry all the time. They ignore, I injected that, but I'm still reading from his statement. They ignore the reality that the business model is still unproven, and that in all likelihood it will fail in its current form and will require substantial changes until it finally works. That sounds harsh, but it's true. That statement is not meant to discourage, it's meant to simply acknowledge the fact that you will have to pivot and change certain things about your strategy before you will be able to succeed. Given that this is the case, you need to be nimble, free of substantial overhead costs, trying different things, learning by trial and error. Once something sticks, as actually evidenced by real customers and revenue, and the business model works, then you focus, invest, and grow. And this principle applies even in ministry. Stop trying to do everything at once. Take the part of your vision that you can do now, and that you know that God has already anointed you to do now, that you have the grace for now, and focus on that. Work on that. Refine it. Be faithful in it. And then wait for God to bring the expansion. Because very often God is not going to bring expansion or enlargement to your vision until you've been faithful in that. It's not like God is trying to, you have to prove something to God, because God already knows what you're capable of, but rather God uses that process to groom you, to prepare you, and to condition you to be able to manage what He's going to give you. He has to grow you into it. Another thing that is critical to your focus is your priorities. One of the principal focus problems that most of us have in business and everyday life is our tendency to get our priorities scrambled. Back in 1906, the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto realized that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. You'll find that in almost every country in the world. 80% of the land is owned by 20% of the population. And he went on to observe, and we can call that unfair or whatever, but this is something that happens. He went on to observe that 20% of the pea pods in his garden produced 80% of the peas. So it's not just people, this happens with gardens too. And I found that with a lot to be true in my garden, where a relatively small portion of the plants produced more than everything else. I didn't mathematically keep track of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out to be that 80-20 proportion. And this idea that he later wrote about became known as the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, or what they call the law of the vital few. Likewise, most of our results in life, in everything we do, tend to come from 20% of our efforts, especially in business. For most of us, 80% of what you're doing right now, you're wasting your time. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but for most of the vast majority of us, it is true that 80% of what you're doing to try to push forward your ministry, push forward your business, it's a waste of time. It's either producing nothing at all for you or producing very little and therefore not worth it. And so most of the rest of what we're doing is either unproductive or even counterproductive. And so an integral part of what you need to do to have proper focus is to reprioritize on the more productive aspects of whether it's your business or what God has given you. Focus on what is productive, what's bearing fruit. Because the fruitful, especially in ministry, the fruitfulness, the fruit you're producing is the evidence that God is in it in the first place. So it's not producing fruit, something's wrong. What is it producing right now? What's coming out of it? Give your focus to what deserves it. Another focus you will need to have, and this isn't the main focus, but you're going to need to have some kind of focus on people to some extent, especially in any business that involves human contact, whether it's customers, staff, vendors, distributors, or your staff in ministry if you have any, your church members if you've got any, or just the people you associate with and the people you're responsible for, the people you're mentoring, the people you're preaching to and teaching. Or people in your personal life. To some extent, at least some of them are going to have to be a high priority focus. Maya Angelou, the famous poet, once said, "People may not remember what you said or what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." That's something you have to understand about people, is people will have bad days. They will often be irrational. They will even take things personally. You're going to take things personally. I've taken things personally. And I try never to tell anyone, oh, don't take it personally. Because I think that's just a cop-out, especially when people in business say, this isn't personal, it's just business. No, that just means it's not personal to you. It means you're a jerk and you don't care about anybody but yourself. But anyhow, so I won't tell anybody not to take something personally. Because a lot of things are personal, maybe most things, perhaps even all things are personal. So people are going to take things personally. You're going to take things personally. Be mindful of these things. I like to think of this, having a proper focus with people. I think of it as being real. And that's R-E-A-L, and each letter stands for something. The first is respect. This is an extremely powerful factor in building trust in any relationship, whether it's a business relationship, a ministry relationship, a personal relationship. There's an old saying, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Most of us remember this saying in terms of our own desire to be respected, but this applies to everyone else too. People in your life will be drawn to where they feel celebrated or at least respected. And so here are some ways you can readily demonstrate respect. Listen to understand, not to reply. Most of us tend to listen to reply. We're listening to what somebody says, but only enough so we can figure out what we're going to say next. And this ruins a lot of communication. And I see people do it all the time. I usually don't say anything, but I know when they're just listening to reply, because they missed half of what I said, or more. Listen to understand. And a lot of us, we take this habit into our relationship with God, and in our prayer life, we're not observant. We're not. Oh goodness. Even when we're inquiring of God, we're listening and we're waiting for God to say something. But we're paying attention for what we want to hear, paying attention for what we want from God. And sometimes God has more to say to us. But as soon as what we heard or saw or otherwise perceived what we think we were after, we're done with prayer. We're off to go deliver a prophetic word, or go do this, that, or the other thing with the thing that God just showed us. But He had more to show us. We do it to people, we do it to Him. So listen to understand. And listen until you understand. Not just to reply. Another thing is to express gratitude. Everybody likes to be appreciated. And nobody, I mean nobody likes an ungrateful person. I know people, I know one guy, he's always complaining. I keep meaning that next time I see him, next time I hear him complain, I'm going to give him a challenge. I'm going to say, look, here's a challenge for you. Try to go 2 hours without complaining about anything. The guy can complain about anything. And it causes people not to like him. So express gratitude and don't complain. Another thing to do is to be kind, even to people, and maybe even especially to people who can do nothing for you. It's not going to hurt you to be gracious. There are people I'm nice to and I'm kind to, I'm polite to, and I know they don't like me. I don't expect everybody to like me. Who says they gotta like me? Now, if they're my brethren in Christ, they're supposed to love me, but guess what? I may still rub them the wrong way. Maybe they got good reason not to like me. Maybe they think Brother Sam's a little jerk. That's okay. That's okay. They don't gotta like me. But that doesn't change the fact that I can still decide to be kind. Another thing to do to have proper focus with people is to learn people's names. I've been working on that for the last couple of years. It has to be really bad. In fact, I will admit that in my younger years, when I was deliberately a jerk sometimes, I would try hard to forget somebody's name because I knew it bothered people. I was such a troll. I knew it bothered people when you didn't remember their name. And Dale Carnegie wasn't kidding when he said that a person's name, for most people, the sound of their name is the sweetest sound in the world. They love hearing their name. So don't just remember important people. When somebody remembers my name, but doesn't even try to learn the waiter's name or get their own assistant's name right, it makes a very clear statement. It practically screams. See, when I see somebody, they remember names of people who are quote unquote important. What that says to me is, you only matter to me if I can get something from you, or if I want something from you. It says a lot about the character of the person, because they're only remembering the important people. And people will pick up on that. Not everybody, but people will. They may not pick up on the subtlety of that. They may not pick up on the fact that you only matter. They only matter to you if you want something from them. Some of them will, some of them won't. But remember what I said before, they'll remember how you made them feel. And nobody likes somebody that makes them feel unimportant. Especially if they know they are. But that's another subject. Another thing to do is to acknowledge people for what they do. Acknowledge people for what they do. Express genuine concern. I regularly check up on people that I haven't heard from in a while. In fact, I think last night, got a Skype message from somebody, so I spent a while on Skype having a conversation with a guy I know in the States. We used to play a game together on the internet since like 1995, so I've known him for a long time through the internet. And so if he does call me on Skype, if I'm not particularly busy, I'll take out a little while to talk to him. And I check up on people, make sure they're doing all right, and not just people that I want to do business with, or people that are useful to me. Because that guy in particular, he's pretty. I don't really want to call him useless because he's my friend and I love him and all that. But as far as usefulness to me, he has none. But that's not the point. I try to check up on people and make sure they're okay. If I learn that somebody in my network is experiencing some kind of difficulty or personal problem, I reach out to them. Developing this habit will improve your business and personal relationships. It'll also keep you from being so focused on yourself that you start, especially if you got problems. A lot of us, we focus on our problems, we start feeling sorry for ourselves, we don't care about somebody else sometimes. Another thing that I like to do is to commit random acts of kindness. Now this isn't just about creating an image or a perception of you as a good person, but it's rather, it's actually about being good and kind for its own sake. Kindness is often in short supply in today's world of selfish ambition. Whether in business or in ministry, kindness is in very short supply, very often. While it's not always going to be appreciated, that's not the point. It does make you better able to serve others and to make the world a better place. In the end, it also distinguishes you from what people in business call the sea of, or I like to call, they call it the sea of sameness, I call it the sea of selfish sameness that seems to be present in so many different industries. Don't you think we got enough selfish people in the world? Another key to proper focus when you're dealing with people is empathy. Now, you may not always be able to understand what other people are feeling, but you should be able to allow yourself to identify with where they're at. Every now and then I have to tell people, look, I try to love people where they're at. There's a particular person that some of us knew, and they don't like this guy. It's the complaining guy. And I said to these people, I said, I love people where they're at. I know that people are the way they are for a reason. And there's things that made him like that. It doesn't release him from responsibility for his behavior, but I understand how it happened. I understand what life did to him and how he became that way, and the set of decisions that he made that turned him into who he is right now. It doesn't mean he's going to be that way forever. It doesn't have to stay that way. So at least allow yourself to be able to identify with where they're at. Allow yourself to at least acknowledge where they're at. Because we're not all at the same place. People have pain. People have personal tragedies. People have made bad decisions. And some people are just rotten. You know, I mean, sure, the honey badger don't care. But if you're going to achieve your destiny, you better care. Another thing is acceptance. I refuse to tolerate people. I don't believe in tolerance. I believe in acceptance. Because if you're tolerating, that implies that on some level, if I'm tolerating somebody, that means on some level they're to be resented. Imagine for a moment if you just arrived at the home of a loved one of yours for a visit, and they open the door, and when they see you, they say, "Go ahead, come on in, I'll tolerate you in my house for a while." And they mean it. and you know they mean it, they say that to your face, how welcome would you feel? Probably not very. Accepting someone doesn't mean you have to agree with them on everything. Doesn't mean you're going to share all the same ideas, and it doesn't mean you have to endorse their ideas or their beliefs or their behavior. All it means is that whatever differences there might be or whatever issues they might have, you do still value them as a person, as a human being. Another key to focusing properly with people is love. Authenticity is an amazingly difficult thing to fake. There was a comedian, died years ago. He was 100 years old when he died. He used to say, authenticity is the greatest thing in the world. If you can fake that, you've got it made. George Burns was his name. And he was kind of right. Yeah, it's kind of true. If you can fake authenticity, you pretty much do have it made. But I don't want you to fake it. First of all, it's really difficult to fake, and most people can't anyway. And if you try to fake it, you're going to get caught. And if nothing else, God is going to know. And let's face it, if you were slick and smooth enough to fake authenticity, you wouldn't be watching this video. And this doesn't mean you've got to be mushy or touchy-feely, or the guy that serenades everybody and all that. It's a choice. It's a decision to feel and express genuine caring and concern for others, not just as whether they're your clients or your customers or your church members or somebody who has an immediate value to your life that you think you can measure, but as people whose lives and actions affect the lives of others. Focus, when properly understood and applied, is going to help you to achieve a lot more in less time. It will also help you to gain clarity of purpose. It's not just going to it can revolutionize your business life, it can revolutionize your ministry, but it's also going to dramatically improve your personal relationships as well. So now what I want you to do is turn this video off and go work on your focus. Do it now. Brother Sam, signing out. God bless you, and God keep you.